A big hello from London. There's quite a complex series of weekly patterns last week, so let's look at the currencies first. A mixed bag last week with weekly key reversals down in US dollar Indian rupee, euro against the Japanese yen, if only just on this one, and in US dollar Macedonian dinar. In these three, only the euro against the Japanese yen had any follow-on moves lower this week, but they seem to have been quickly extinguished. Yet prices still remain within the main body of last week's action. We also had weekly key reversals up this time in US dollar Israeli shekel, euro against the Swedish krona, euro against the Polish zloty, US dollar against the Taiwanese dollar, US dollar against the Moroccan dirham, and US dollar against the Chilean peso. Of these, all except the US dollar Israeli shekel have seen follow-on moves higher this week, though they have been limited moves up. Things were not much easier in the stock index and stock index futures last week. We had weekly key reversals down in both the NASDAQ composite and the NASDAQ 100 indexes, as well as the E-mini S&P futures, along with similar moves in the PHLX semiconductor index and in the Chinese CSI300 and A50 indexes. After initial reactionary moves up in the NASDAQ indexes plus the E-mini S&P futures and the PHLX semiconductor index on Monday, we have seen a reversion back down, and the possible start, just the start, of what looks like a follow-on lower yesterday and again today so far. In the Chinese CSI300 and the A50 index as well, the follow-on move lower happened from the start of the week. However, there were three glaring exceptions to these seeming hesitant follow-on moves lower, and they were the French CAC40 futures, the Saudi TDW main index, and the Russell2000 index of the US. In French CAC40 futures, we had of all things a contrary weekly key reversal up last week, the third within 5 weeks. Here, this week we have not seen a follow-on move lower, at least if we did it was temporary and not much of one, and instead yesterday we saw a new high, one we had not seen since early May. And though we have not had much of a follow-on higher today, we're still sort of hanging close-ish to last Friday's close. An interesting development in this market, as it does not follow what we have seen elsewhere in some of the other major, indeed smaller markets. Then there was the Saudi TDW main index, where we did see a weekly key reversal down last week, but this week already we have seen a strong reactionary move back up, such that we are set with barely half the week gone. We are set to make a possible immediate countering weekly key reversal up. So watch this space. Not such a similar case in the Russell2000 index, which had a weekly key reversal down last week, right at the top of the recent market, which looked good on paper. However, prices opened higher, and once they have tried to move up, they've also tried to move lower as well. Overall, most of the week's actions still remain within last week's range, though we have moved towards the bottom end. Okay, so over now to the commodities. And we had a vaguely similar situation in some of the metals. We had weekly key reversals down last week. In LME 3-month aluminium, in LME 3-month nickel, in LME 3-month tin, and even in spot platinum. All four had varying follow-on moves lower this week, though not so much in the case of LME 3-month tin when compared to the others. However, we also had a weekly key reversal up last week in LME steel scrap Turkey, contrary to these other metals. Now, this could be a specific issue related to steel, but this week prices have seen a reactionary moves lower, but for the moment still within last week's range. Finally, there was one other commodity that had a weekly key reversal pattern, and that was a weekly key reversal up last week in Chicago live cattle. Interestingly, this pattern happened only 2 weeks after seeing a weekly key reversal down. So it can be viewed as the beginning and an ending to a prior pattern. And that might be fine, as this week, well, we have seen a strong reactionary move back down, but one has yet not escaped the previous week's range. As always, I'm happy to answer any direct questions if anyone is interested. And with that, I'll finish this section from London and hope you found these comments useful.
Thank you for watching and listening. This weekly broadcast gives the essential market patterns and consequences. Please be aware of the risk disclaimer posted both at the front and at the back of this broadcast. Copyright is Eddie Tofpick and ADM Investor Services International Limited. And here comes the final important bit.